Hey guys, since the start of the league people have been asking, am I gonna do something with the Iron Mass sword and skeletons? And I finally decided to do it because someone during the stream gave me an interesting idea to use Hidden Blade to trigger Iron Mass. And I have been playing quite a lot with this build, actually a bit more than I usually do. And I'm very surprised with the final result. I have 7k life, over 7 million DPS. However, the build requires certain items that don't really have a replacement and they aren't very cheap. I did a rough calculation and I think it costed me around 8 Exiles. That's not counting the 6 linking body armor. So you probably could do it at around 10 Exiles budget, but actually you can push it way higher. You probably could double this DPS, because I have a bunch of jewels and most of them are only 1 damage mod for minions. And the helmet that I use could be replaced with much more expensive one, but it would also give more damage. So this is kind of a budget build, and minion builds usually can be very expensive. But I was able to handle all the game content, including Cirrus Awakening 7. By the way, this is full conversion to hair's damage, so you can actually run even reflect maps without any problems. Despite having 7k life and some mitigation, some defensive layer, the build still felt kind of squishy. I did try tier 15 100% delirium map, and it did take quite a lot of time and it was very sketchy and I actually died a couple times. But I still managed to do it. Oh, and also the clear speed is not the fastest, so in most of the clips I'm gonna show just bossing. Right, intro done, now the science part. First about the Iron Mass and Hidden Blade. The Iron Mass is a sword, and the cool thing is that Summon Skeleton Warriors wield a copy of this weapon while in your main hand. Summon Skeleton Warriors deal triple damage with this weapon if you have hit with this weapon recently. That triple damage doesn't stack with the double damage, so anything that gives minions double damage will not do anything. The weapon also grants Unholy Might, which basically gives extra hairs damage, and also has chance to wither for 2 seconds on hit with this weapon. Now, because skeletons copy this weapon also overrides their base attack speed and base damage, so getting plus levels to skeletons is not gonna do anything except increase their life. And now about the Hidden Blade. I actually did a video about the Hidden Blade. It's mostly for utility things, and in this case it basically automates the triple damage for skeletons. The Unseen Strike that you get from the Hidden Blade is a skill that uses your weapons, and if you are dual wielding, it will alternate your weapons. As you can see, the shurikens flying, and every second shot will use Iron Mass weapon. I tested that by using Moonbender. Moonbender has the same wording and requires you to hit with that weapon to cast Lightning Warp automatically. Now the Hidden Blade in this case also works as a curse on hit setup, and it will curse on every proc. If you use Greater Volley support gem, it will shoot in a row. If you use something like GMP, it will shoot in a nova around you. Just experiment whichever you prefer. Also, Hidden Blade does target enemies, so when using for example Greater Volley, it will always shoot towards the enemies that it can't see. Otherwise it shoots randomly. Now if you look again at Iron Mass, it does kind of incentivizes you to play with the full hairs conversion, because Unholy Might is extra hairs and Wither increases the hairs damage enemies take. So the next thing is to figure out how to get full conversion into hairs. There are actually 2 ways. Triad grip gloves using 4 white sockets, which is very expensive, or using the cluster jewel, Skeletal Atrophy, which does give skeletons 30% physical damage converted into hairs. And that's why I went with the triple white socket Triad grip gloves, because that's a cheaper way. Also, you can see that I only have 3 sockets in Triad grips. That's because I wasn't sure how the conversion would take priority, but you can still change, add or remove sockets from Triad grip even if it is corrupted. Now because this is full conversion into hairs and it is using withers, it does have a slight ramp up time. Now because of that triple damage, you're gonna want to stack a bunch of flat damage to minions. And also because with this weapon, skeletons do have a higher base attack speed. So because of that, I'm stacking a couple of abyss jewels with flat hairs damage to minions. Crown of the Tyrant helmet, which is the cheapest and the best option for this. Because if you get 1 white socket in Crown of the Tyrant, it will give you flat added hairs damage and also reduce enemy hairs resistance as well. There is an alternative super expensive version. In order to out damage the Crown of the Tyrant, in this case you would need Bone Helmet, which has double influence, Elders and Hunters, and the maximum helmet enchantment for skeleton damage. And even then you would only gain 27k DPS increase per skeleton. Now the amulet. Owl's Uprising, the Chaos one, which does grant level 15 Envy skill, and Envy skill also reserves no mana, and it does give flat chaos damage to attacks and spells. An alternative to this would be a rare amulet with +1 to maximum skeletons. This kind of Owl's Uprising is around 1 exalt, and the white socket Crown of the Tyrant is around 2 exalts. The free white socket Triad grip is currently increasing in price. It seems it's around 2 exalts, but I think I bought it for 60 chaos. You could get away with just 2 white socket Triad grip. You would only lose like 20 to 30k DPS per skeleton. Now there's one last kind of required item, which is a Watcher Scythe for haste. You have phasing while affected by haste, and that's how I can permanently and without issues maintain my hidden blade. Watcher Scythe with that mod is around 2 exalts. And now the rest of my items. The body armor, I managed to find this one on sale, +1 to maximum skeletons, had life, some resistances, and was able to craft percentage life. You want something similar with +1 to maximum skeletons. It is only delve drop. I managed to 6-link this body armor myself, so it wasn't too expensive. I think I paid less than 1 exalt. As for rings, you kind of want a Redeemer's rings because they can roll minion damage, but you also want some mana regen. This build has some issues with mana regen, and also capping resistances was a bit challenging. I do have pretty good boots, just life, a lot of resistances and movement speed. By the way, I forgot to mention, you can actually bench craft +1 to maximum skeletons on a helmet. If you could get either Elder's Bone Helmet or Hunter's Bone Helmet with skeleton damage enchantment and bench craft +1 to maximum skeletons, you would reach either the same or even a higher DPS. You would lose damage per skeleton, but you would gain extra skeleton, so overall it would probably be more DPS. I will include both of those optional helmets in the PUB. The last item is Darkness Enthroned belt. If you can get really good jewels, this belt will give you a lot of damage. What you want is flat life, but I already have so much life, maybe you don't even need flat life. Then flat chaos damage to minions, or flat physical damage to minions, and then minions deal percentage increased damage if you have used a minion skill recently. And the minion skill can be not just skeletons, but also like flesh offering. You also want to get some taunt and blind for minions on one of those jewels. I have more of those in the passive skill tree, but also using normal jewels. Just a very cheap one, life for me and damage for minions. So like I said, you can push this build to much higher damage if you can afford better jewels. As for large cluster jewel, I only wanted skeleton atrophy for conversion and then call to slaughter to make them, well, faster. And also you want this mod. Other small passive skills have 25 or 35 increased effect, which is gonna multiply the minion damage that you get from this. And other stats if you also can manage to get that. On the medium jewels, there aren't that many good options, so I wanted to make skeletons immortal for 4 seconds after being summoned because they aren't very tanky. So I went with the Blessed Rebirth and Feasting Fiends just to give them some leech and some damage. And on the second medium cluster jewel, I went with the Curses and Misery Everlasting, which increases the Despair Curse effect, and also got 35% increased effect of that. I'm also using one Careful Planning jewel which transforms intelligence into dexterity, which is very needed because I'm using maximum level haste, which does require a lot of dex. I also in the end decided to use Thread of Hope at which area the medium sized ring, which does reach Revenue's Horde, and the big life node, and saves me a couple points which I then spent on the getting life and damage elsewhere. Well, I was planning to leave passive skill tree for the last, but I guess since I'm talking about this, I anointed Death Attunement, so I don't have to spend points traveling to that one, it's just to get +1 to maximum skeletons. You can also see that I avoided taking spiritual aid because nodes behind that aren't very strong and the spiritual aid itself is not needed for me at all. You can also see that I took the cluster wheels before the Grave Pact, but I'm not taking that for the double damage because double damage doesn't stack with the triple damage. I only took it because it's good damage nodes. I also picked up Tireless node and the nodes behind that reduced the mana cost as well, which is kind of needed. Of course I did take Resolute Technique because there's no reason to not take it. You don't want to miss. Now for Ascendancy points, first I took Mindless Aggression, and then actually I took Commander of Darkness. Remember, +2 to all minion skill gems doesn't give more damage because skeleton damage is overwritten by the weapon. So from Merciless Lab I took Bone Barrier, and then from Uber Lab I took Unnatural Strength. Bone Barrier node is actually quite good. It does give you like a Steel Skin guard skill, but also 1% additional physical damage reduction per minion up to 10. And I have Bone Armor on my left click, so it activates as soon as it is off cooldown. And lastly for the skills and links. So I actually have level 21 Vile Summon Skeletons without the quality, but you would definitely want quality because it does increase more damage. And then it's linked to minion damage, added here's damage, awakened one if you can get it, multi-strike, rootless, and melee splash, which I do swap into void manipulation. That's why I wanted the white sockets on my body armor, which you can get by getting Vorici in research. In my weapon I have summon Karen Golem linked with feeding frenzy and fortify, but you can replace fortify with meat shield. Also, if you can get out quality summon Karen Golem for increased buff effect, do that. It's gonna give you a bit more damage. In the hidden blade I have Greater Volley, Hex Touch linked with Despair. In my boots I have Enduring Cry linked with Second Wind, Flame Dash and Flesh Offering, and in the helmet I have Desecrate. Now the Enduring Cry actually kind of fooled me. I wasn't actually maintaining my endurance charges, and it was bad idea to even use Warcry because it would taunt all the enemies to attack me, unless you let your minions taunt first. And the AoE of Enduring Cry was so small that I would often just not get any endurance charges, but I still prefer to use Enduring Cry rather than Rowling Cry because it does give me regen. And finally in my gloves I have Haste, Anomalous Arctic Armor linked with Elemental Proliferation. And I do swap Arctic Armor and Proliferation with just Summon Skitterbots and Enlighten. I do prefer to use Anomalous Arctic Armor while mapping because when enemies hit, they have a chance to get frozen and proliferate that freeze to other enemies, giving me a bit more, I guess, defensive layer. But for targets that cannot be frozen, I just use Skitterbots for maximum damage. Like during the Cirrus fight, which by the way triggered me so much. I hate that fight with passion. Luckily next league we should be getting Atlas rework, and hopefully some other endgame boss is gonna take Cirrus' place, and hopefully the fight mechanics are gonna be better. So that basically covers the build. I haven't planned a new build yet. I have a couple ideas but nothing concrete. So if you got some interesting build idea that you would want me to do, let me know in the comments below. Also, I always forget to mention that I'm streaming basically every day. You can find the schedule and the link to my stream in the video description as well. And lastly, if you like of meta builds and experimental build ideas, be sure to subscribe to this channel. For now, thank you for watching and I will see you in the next video.